Hello there, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program New Zealand Reborn, here on the surface of the Mun next to beautiful New Auckland, which is quite a sight to see this time of year, with Kerbin just on the horizon, almost at all times actually, because of its position on the South Pole. Yeah, I lost the launch footage for this particular module, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure it was launched on a Castle 1 booster because of its size. This is actually the storage module for our scrap metal and our rocket parts. And using those two, we can build our own rockets here on the surface of the Mun without the assistance of the Killington Space Center. But here we are in the mission control back on Kerbin with that module attached. We are going to accept a bunch of tourist contracts because you may notice up above our funds are getting quite low. We are under 2 million now. And our space agency needs to keep those funds rolling in. So we are accepting a flyby Minmus, multi-moon flyby, land on Minmus, and an asteroid rendezvous tourist mission. And in the tech tree here, we go ahead and pop in there just for a second. But with these tourist missions, it requires a new feat of engineering, some new expertise in the realm of spaceplanes, which we have not delved into much previously. But we're going to design our first partially reusable shuttle program. This first shuttle is going to be named the NZSA Zaida, and it will take 8 Kerbals onto multiple Mooner missions. It appears they all made it back to Kerbin safe and sound under the expert piloting of Jebediah McLaughlin, only with a couple bits of paint burned off during re-entry, but that allows us to rate the NZSS Zaida for a number of launches past this. The proof of concept certainly proven its worth to the space agency. And with all that money, what else are we to do than to buy another Castle 1 booster? These are named after an entomologist from New Zealand named Amy Castle, if you were wondering where the nomenclature comes from that. But we are launching our factory module on board this one, and the factory is going to allow us to turn all the metal we mine on the moon into rocket parts. And using those, we can build more modules for the base, our very own rockets that don't need to go through Kerbin's atmosphere to launch. It'll kickstart our colonization efforts. Good morning, New Zealand. I'm Chandler Farmer with the Kerbin News Network, bringing you a breaking story as the Scandinavian probe Rysand 1 arrives at the Sarna system, preparing to enter orbit of its largest moon, Tecto. Rysand 1 has subsequently returned the first ever close-up images of Sarnas, and is the first Kerbal-made object to enter the ringed planet's sphere of influence. According to the director of the United Scandinavian Space Agency, Rysand will remain in an elliptical orbit of Tecto for a period of roughly 2 years in order to collect sufficient scientific data about the moon and its atmosphere. Several confidential sources have indicated that collecting science may not be the sole reason for its long stay over Tecto, revealing that Rysand's immense distance from Kerbin has led to communications issues and extremely low data transmission rates. New Zealand's own Tumuaki 2 probe, currently orbiting Lathe in the Joule system, has experienced less extreme versions of this same problem, lending credibility to this theory. New Zealand's Rongo 1 probe, currently en route to Sarnas, was equipped with similar comms arrays to that of Rysand 1, and predicting communication issues, the New Zealand Space Agency has already begun constructing another probe with cutting-edge comm systems much better than any Scandinavian facility can produce. This development allows us to segue into the second story of note this evening. The President of New Zealand, seeing the nation recapture dominance in the space industry, has made an ambitious goal to put a Kiwi on the surface of Duna by the year 1995. Only time will tell if we can achieve this goal, but the hopes of our people are behind this great and noble endeavor. We will continue to bring you updates on the latest space missions and more here on KNN. I'm Chandler Farmer. Glory to New Zealand. Well, the New Zealand Space Agency certainly has its work cut out for it if it's to put a Kerbal on the surface of Duna by 1995. But we still have more menial issues to handle, like, of course, getting more money. That's always going to be a problem, and we're always going to need more funds in our pockets. I lost the launch audio again for this, but Zaida's second flight, piloted again by Jebediah McLaughlin, he is our only properly rated pilot currently on the surface of Kerbin that we can use to run these. But our next contract involves going to an asteroid that is on a close encounter with Kerbin. And these 4 tourists are paying quite a handsome sum to get themselves into a position near the asteroid so they can take pictures and, whatever the heck tourists do on an asteroid. The horrors of whatever they're doing is beyond my comprehension, but we are certainly approaching the asteroid, burning to get a match our speed with it, and nicely parking near the surface. We don't actually have a grapple arm on this, so we can't anchor ourselves to the surface, but Jeb gets out to take a couple pictures and to grab a sample of the asteroid. Every single asteroid that we get a sample of gives us, I think, 35 science per sample that we return to Kerbin. So this is certainly a worthwhile effort science-wise, give or take how expensive it is. But the tourists more than make up for the costs of such a thing. But we splash down nicely into the ocean yet again. So here is where I have to do a little bit of explaining. So these repetitive launches to the surface of the Mun to get these new modules to New Auckland is just getting extremely tedious. So I am now going to just teleport all of the modules to the surface with the caveat that it's assumed all the launches happened as normal, so I will be subtracting all of the funds necessary to pay for the whole thing, the launch stage, the payload, all the wheels and everything, plus a margin of 50,000 just to make up for it a little bit. But this is just going to give me more time to do other things, like working on new exciting missions instead of trying to spend more of my time on doing things that I've already done before. So this next module that we just docked to New Auckland is our storage silo to house our raw metal ore and metal that we smelt from the foundry that we also have just attached there, and that is going to allow us to smelt the ore that we find into raw metal to then produce rocket parts out of. This whole process is actually kind of simple compared to some of the other things I have to deal with, especially in the life support sector and otherwise. So here are the storage tanks that is going to house our liquid fuel and liquid hydrogen that we could use to fuel the foundry actually, and to fuel any rockets that we produce here on the surface of the Mun. And after that, we are going to attach our Kethane storage module. Kethane is the resource that we have to mine to change into liquid fuel, which powers the foundry. And yeah, so this is a one big tank. I could afford to do that here, and it's attached quite simply on the end there. And then, of course, the last module that we are attaching to New Auckland, not permanently though, this is a mining truck. This one has storage for quite a large number of different commodities, including metal ore, water, and kethane. And all the drills on the side there can mine each of those products. But once we attach the truck to the base, we can empty out all of the resources that we need into the various silos here. And then after that's done, with this truck having delivered supplies successfully and mined all the resources it needs, New Auckland is very nearly self-sufficient, and it now has the full capability to produce anything we need, any sort of technology that we need to, which is a huge step. And all that we need now is to put a launch pad onto this, and we can launch our own missions. The next flight of the NZSS Zaida, again piloted by Jebediah McLaughlin, since we lack any other qualified pilots, is going to bring 7 tourists on a journey to Minmus, and then a flyby of the moon and back to the surface of Kerbin. This mission profile has been exactly done before in this exact configuration. So we touch down gently on the surface of Minmus after a few days of flying. Jeb goes ahead and plants a flag here. And on its way to take off, it actually needs some kind of ramp because there's no atmosphere to generate lift on its wings. So we have to journey across the entire ocean, quote unquote, on the surface of Minmus before we reach a part of the terrain that allows us to jump up and get into orbit. But the flyby of the moon goes off without a hitch, and re-entry of Kerbin also goes fairly smoothly for what it is. Re-entry is always a little bit violent, especially considering we are returning from the moon, not just from orbit. But we get into nearly approaching the runway to be able to land on it. I try to burn with the engines here, but they're only rated for vacuum, so it doesn't have enough power to fully reach it, and it splashes down. So although last episode we launched the Duna Explorer 1 to gather a bunch of data, we missed the moon of Ike. That still needs a lot of data gathered from it. So with the help of the United Kerbdom and Poland, who are constructing parts of this mission, we're going to launch 2 orbiters to Ike, and then a rover to land on the surface of Duna to finish gathering some more science there. And hopefully, rounding out 1981, this mission will give us enough science to get the next pivotal technology that we need. Well, without a doubt, that mission could have gone better on the part of the rover, as the antenna could not deploy in time, and it resulted in the engines not being able to receive the signal to fire and land it safely on the surface. But what can you do? Landing on a planet is hard, and Duna is no exception to this rule. So we're trying to attach the launch pad to New Auckland, but um, you can see that the launch pad just starts floating away every time I try to reattach it. And I try this in several different configurations, and there's no real way to solve it that I can find. And I try going into the cheats menu to mess with the physics and making sure that nothing breaks again, but it doesn't look like it wants to work. This just warrants some kind of redesign of New Auckland in the near future. But I didn't want to end on a completely bad note, so with 1,000 science collected from our latest Duna mission, it feels necessary to finally purchase our next comms technology, which allows us to communicate as far as Urlam and Nidon and even Plock in the outer solar system. If we launch these probes, it'll certainly get us a step in the right direction.